in thinking about US goals, and this has been peppered throughout the conversation today, but COP26 is coming up. And what does that mean for US companies? What does that mean for global entities coming together? And really, what can we be looking towards later this year with COP26 as it pertains to our climate commitments? It certainly presents a unique opportunity for the private sector to both support and drive forward climate policy goals and to showcase their own progress towards the 2030 goals. It's an important, but in going towards this, it's important to concretely consider ahead of COP26 what goals the private sector would like to accomplish for a successful meeting and what perhaps is currently missing from the planning that could be addressed in the coming months to make this the most impactful meeting yet. So this session will explore how leading companies are preparing internally, what kinds of commitments and strategies are being considered, and how public-private collaborations are in play for this landmark meeting. Concordia will use this conversation to report out and set the groundwork to collaborate how over the coming months we'll approach the conversations, not only ahead of COP26, but our own flagship forum, the Concordia Annual Summit, taking place in September. So to lead this conversation, we have moderator Hannah Young. She's the Deputy Consul General of the British Consulate General. Of course, the UK is host to COP26 this year. We have Javier Quinones. He's the CEO and Chief Sustainability Officer of IKEA, US. We have Douglas Sabo, Chief Sustainability Officer of Visa. Marissa Drew, Chief Sustainability Officer and Global Head of Sustainability Strategy, Advisory and Finance at Credit Suisse, and Virginie Helias, Chief Sustainability Officer at Procter & Gamble. To my panel, take it away.
Well, hello and good afternoon, everybody. I'm Hannah Young from the British government, and we're really excited about hosting the UN Climate Conference COP26 and taking on the COP presidency later this November. Our overarching theme is all about raising ambition on climate mitigations, on adaptation and resilience, and on financing climate solutions. And this must be a whole of society effort. We need countries, states, cities, businesses, civil society, and individuals to play their part. And so I'm delighted to be moderating this Concordia Sustainability Today session on the road to COP26. And over the next 20 minutes, we're going to hear from our panelists on their own climate efforts and their views on what will make COP26 a success. So without further ado, I would like to ask each of our panelists, as we start gearing up for COP26, what are your organisation's main areas of focus and how are you progressing against your climate goals? And if I could invite Marisa from Credit Suisse to kick us off. Marisa.
Sure thing. Well, delighted to be here. Thank you for having me, and I'm very pleased to be engaging in this conversation with such esteemed panelists who I admire and respect your companies very, very much. So maybe a little alliteration to start. I'm thinking of this in the context at Credit Suisse in sort of 3 C buckets, if you will. One is company, meaning how are we acting as an enterprise ourselves? What are we doing as an organization around our climate goals? The next C is clients. So how are we helping our clients through the journey? And that can be in the form of mobilizing capital, but also to raise education and awareness so that our clients are much more facile with the overall agenda for climate. And thirdly would be collaboration. So we are spending a lot of time with cross-industry and cross-sector actors coming together to say if maybe we bring our unique expertise as actors, we've got a fighting chance to get there on solving some of these intractable problems. So really quickly skipping through. As a finance organization, we've committed to net zero using science-based targets. And as a financial services provider, we lend and we bank virtually every industry. So if we're going to get to net zero all the way through scope 3 for us, we pretty much have to map every industry and figure out which industries can be on that path to net zero with us so that ultimately we're in alignment on scope 3. Secondly, on clients, just to give you a little bit of an example, we have created numerous funds for our clients to invest in thematically along climate agendas, everything from climate innovation, so those disruptors, through to more traditional sort of thematic funds that target specific things like the food system and regenerative agriculture. And finally, we're spending a lot of time in the education space. So we've just put out a report that I'm very proud of called Decarbonizing Your Portfolio. So if you are investing your money, how do you think not only about investing in companies that are on the pathway to green, but how do you look holistically at your portfolio at that level and think about it? And then finally, when we talk about collaboration, we want to come together as an industry because we think finance with all of its power can drive so much good change if we are unified in our approach. So a couple of examples, we've joined something called the FSTF, that is the Financial Services Task Force under the auspices of His Royal Highness Prince Charles. And this is an industry effort to think about how do we influence policymakers like the G7? How do we set targets around what good looks like for things like carbon offsets? How long do we accept carbon offsets versus carbon capture technology and all of that, but as an industry? And we're also tackling really tough things. So the last panelist just touched on, like biodiversity. For financial services organizations and for our investors to be thinking about investing behind biodiversity, you have to have financially material metrics, and those don't really exist today. So we're working with NGOs and climate scientists together as a group to try to figure out some of those hard graph things.
Thanks, Marisa. Let me bring Javier now in from IKEA. Same question to you, Javier. What is your main focus at the moment? I might move to Doug while Javier is working on taking himself off mute. Javier, we'll come back to you in a moment, but Doug from Visa, over to you.
Great, thank you. And first, thank you to the whole Concordia team and to all the audience for joining us today. I mean, at Visa, the global payments technology company, we're really excited for the journey to COP26 and for COP26 itself. At Visa, we believe in driving an inclusive and sustainable world, and we believe that this needs to be the decisive decade of action on climate. We, in April, this is well timed, in April, we made a number of new announcements and commitments as part of our roadmap to COP26 and beyond. We announced that we have achieved carbon neutrality in our operations. Our operational footprint is quite small. We already transitioned to 100% renewable electricity. We announced a commitment to net zero emissions, including our value chain by 2040. And we announced a commitment to and an aspiration to be a climate positive company. And the reason that that's significant is, again, as a payments technology company, our own operational footprint is quite small and has largely been addressed, although we'll continue to look for ways to squeeze out any remaining emissions that we have. But you have to get your own house in order first, and that's where our focus has been for a number of years. But when we look at really the potential that we have to make a difference, it's really looking at bringing the full force of Visa, our products, our services, our network, our data, our expertise, our brand platform. I mean, we are a network that we're very fortunate to be a network that can connect billions of consumers, over 2 billion consumers around the world, use our network to buy things, to consume, to go places, buy travel. We connect millions of merchants, thousands of financial institutions, hundreds of governments. And so that is the role that we're looking at of what we can do as to be a climate positive company, to bring all of those forces to bear to help others understand their footprint, to inspire them to action. So we are working on understanding consumers, what are their barriers and drivers of sustainable living and sustainable consumption. We're right now in the midst of the third year of a great 30-country study led by GlobeScan, but with other partners like IKEA and ourselves and a few others to really understand what motivates consumers, what will it take to get consumers to shift behaviors in many ways. We're working to inspire action, including through the Brands for Good initiative that P&G and ourselves and others have been founders of, to really make sustainable living more attractive and more rewarding and attainable. We're working to empower consumers. We have a partnership with a firm called Ecolytic, and there's others in that space, to help through our banks have consumers have better understanding of the footprint of their consumption on a transaction level and be able to take action on that. And finally, we're looking at unique ways that payments, that digital payments in particular in our network can help enable sustainable behaviors themselves. So we're working with 400 transit agencies to take friction out of consumers and travelers taking public transit. We're working with EV charging networks to help take friction and address issues of range anxiety. work in the space of travel and tourism to make it more sustainable, and other areas. And we're really looking to use our voice as we are today and in the lead up to COP26. So really exciting agenda, and really proud to be here today.
Thank you, Doug. That's a really impressive, broad effort. Javier, let me bring you back in now. Tell us what your focus is at IKEA.
Thank you, Hannah. I'm so sorry. I had some issues here with the connection. But thanks for the invitation. Thanks to Concordia and thanks to my colleagues in the panel. It's a pleasure to be here and to share a bit what we are doing. I think for us at IKEA, we are so privileged, right, that we enter in many people's home. And we even see it as a responsibility, actually, to not only enter, but also help and inspire people in living in a more sustainable way. So at IKEA, everything starts with our vision. Our vision is to create a better life for the many people. And that includes the home, as I was saying. And we see the home as a big part of all the planet, as the home that we all share. So that's the starting point. And we put all this together under our strategy, what we call the People and Planet Strategy, where we have decided that we are going to be climate positive by 2030. We have been doing many investments in the past, but also we continue. We already produce more clean energy today than the one that we consume in our retail operations. In the US, we have invested in forestry. We own today more than 240,000 solar panels across the US, 2 wind farms, and we have been doing this during the last couple of years. And then, of course, this strategy is broken in small or shorter-term goals. I'm super proud, actually. I'm very happy that we are on a very good way and probably to do things before 2030. And we have things there like in 2025, doing all the deliveries with electric vehicles. We're doing it today in New York, and this is a big commitment that we have. We launched this year, and not to forget food. I think it's an important part of all this issue we are tackling today, right? And we launched our Plan Balls, which is, it has a planet impact, 4%, or you could say 96% less than the traditional meatball. So big commitments, big things from the circularity as well, from the design of the product to the second, third, and finally recycling every product that we put in place and in the market. And then we say lately, it's a good business to be a good business. And we are very, very firm towards our goals, and that's the strategy that gives us the clarity to continue.
Thank you, Javier. And last but by no means least, Virginie, please tell us about Procter & Gamble's climate goals and how you're progressing them.
Yes, thank you, Hannah. It's an honor to be here. So our climate goal is part of our Ambition 2030 roadmap that we launched 3 years ago. And we have a science-based target that is to reduce our emission by an absolute 50% in our operation. And last year we achieved a 52% reduction. So that is absolute, which means that going forward we need to absorb growth. So we cannot rest on our laurels, far from it. And one key driver of this reduction goal is to transition to renewable electricity. So today, over 95% of our purchased electricity is coming from renewable sources globally. And it's not just about purchasing green electricity, because we also invest in major projects of biomass, solar, wind, to generate additional green electricity. And in the US, we've recently been recognized by the Environmental Protection Agency as the second ranking company for on-site generation of renewable electricity nationwide. Now, late in 2019, I think when the UN published their emission gap report, we saw how much, collectively, we were basically falling short of the targets. And also that the next decade, so this one was the window. We wanted to have a chance to change the course on climate. And that was a trigger for us. And so we ask ourselves, how can we accelerate our efforts beyond the current science-based target? And so last July, we announced a new goal on climate. We announced that we will be carbon neutral for the 2020-2030 decade in our operation. And so that means that on top of reducing our own emission, which remains the absolute priority, we will balance the emission that we are not yet able to eliminate by investing in natural climate solution. So as we speak, we are developing a portfolio of projects that either protect or restore, those ecosystem that store massive amounts of carbon. And so from the Brazil Atlantic forest to the Philippines Palawan mangroves. And so that is basically what we do in our operation. But beyond our operation, we are also working on reducing emissions in our supply chain and the emissions linked to consumer usage of our product. I mean, those in-use emissions account for 85% of our Scope 3 emission. I mean, think of it as the emission related to people using heated water to wash their hair, their clothes, their dishes, or to shave. And we touch 5 billion people through our brands every day. So that is a lot of emissions. So those are emissions that we do not control directly, but we can enable people to reduce them. And so an example is how we engage with consumers to drive greater use of cold water when they do their laundry. So in North America, for instance, Tide is working to make sure that 3 out of 4 loads are done in cold instead of hot. Today, it's a bit over 50%. Or in Europe, it's about reducing the temperature by 5 degrees by 2025. And altogether, this effort we estimate will be about 30 million tons of CO2. So that is significant. And just yesterday, we announced that we signed a Space Act agreement with NASA. Yes, NASA. To test laundry solutions on the International Space Station. And so Tide will design the first detergent for space, so fully biodegradable, using 0 or little water and very little energy. And so we do that so that we can learn our way here on Earth, to fully decarbonize the laundry process. So, and we have many other examples on how we innovate to decarbonize our supply chain and how we leverage the scale, the influence of our brands to really enable people to embrace a low carbon lifestyle. So, and just finally, I would say, in terms of our efforts beyond 2030, we believe that net zero greenhouse gas emission no later than 2050 is a must. I mean, there should be actually no debate about this, but the devil is in the how and the glide path. So P&G has committed to release our climate transition action plan before the end of the year. So it will have very specific time-bound targets, on the path to this net zero across the 3 scopes. So more to come on this very soon.
I have to say it's really encouraging and impressive to hear all of your organisation's efforts. And I want to turn to the relationship that the private sector has and the importance of the private sector in supporting climate solutions. Javier, could you tell us what role do you think the private sector can play in delivering on Paris commitments?
Well, I think it's private sector, it's public sector, and it's every single individual, right? One sector probably cannot find the whole of the solution, but will find a part of the solution. So a key component, I would say. And I think it's not anymore about what you do, but it's more important how you do it, right? And I like to say this also. In the future, unless you really take care of how you do things, there will not be a reason for your company to exist. So it's time to take responsibility, and it's really time to act. So everyone, absolutely everyone, will play a key role in transforming this. And I know we are running out of time, so I will stop there, but absolutely a key role to make that happen.
And Virginie, back to you. Same question. From where you sit, what role can the private sector play?
Yeah, I think that since COP21, it has become so clear that the climate crisis will be addressed jointly by government or business, or it will not be. I think 6 years later, this is not even a question. And I believe that the pandemic, like on many other areas, have has been revealing, showing that private sector was able to rise to the challenge to complement the governmental action. P&G, like many of all of you, with mobilized resources, human, financial, and our scale. Also our creativity. I didn't know that we could retrofit packing lines, detergent packing lines to make face shields. So, and the same is true for climate, but even with a higher urgency, because there's no vaccine against climate. I think on the bright side, we are collectively making progress. I think WWF just released a report showing that 60% of the Fortune 500 companies have now a climate goal, which is 10 times higher than what it was at the time of the Paris Agreement. But only 13% of these companies have targets that are validated by the Science-Based Targets. So I think there is still a long way to go. We can do it. We've seen and we've learned how to do it actually during the pandemic, but we need to up our ambitions collectively.
Thank you. And I think I'm right in saying that the majority of the emissions reductions required to keep us to 1.5 degree world come at the subnational level, which obviously includes the private sector. I want to turn to Doug now. Doug, Visa signed up to the business ambition for 1.5 degrees. And I'm really interested in what led you to make that pledge and how you're planning on playing that commitment forward.
Sure, great question. I think really it just comes down to, frankly, this is what the world needs. We are already seeing the impacts of where we already are as a planet on the trajectory that we're on. Visa is a very global company, but we are proud to be headquartered in California, and already in our own backyard, we've had the impacts on our own employees, on our own business here from the presence of drought, but also the growth in wildfires. If I had my windows open maybe a number of months ago, it was the day of the orange sky across this whole area, the Bay Area, because of that. And so we're seeing that here, but then multiply that around the world, and you see the disruption to communities, to people, to livelihoods, to economies. And so for us, yes, of course, first and foremost, it's a moral imperative that we all take this action now for people today and also for future generations. But it's also a business imperative. These disruptions have impacts on our business. So this makes moral sense, it makes business sense. And our journey playing this commitment forward is activating the strategy that I had talked through. It's really looking at, and I think more and more companies are looking at this as what's the full force of what we can bring to the table in unique and innovative ways, including a lot, as Marisa was saying earlier too, looking at how can we work not only in our own company, but with clients and bring other solutions to the table. So we're going to continue executing on that.
Thank you. And Marisa, Credit Suisse has also signed up to the business ambition to 1.5. What are the steps that you're taking to deliver on that commitment?
Yes, absolutely. And I think we're so much mission aligned with everybody who's on this panel. So we're all in violent agreement, which is a wonderful thing to see. Which is why the collaboration is working so well. But I think what we're doing now to pay it forward is we're using it as a lens to inform everything that we do. And we say that we think about this in a sustainability triangle. And that triangle is disruption, so financing the disruptors, these young companies that are creating breakthrough technologies or solutions, which are inspiring me every day, from the plant-based burger companies that we're taking public to alternative packaging companies and breakthrough solutions for intractable problems in some of the hard to abate sectors, that we still don't have pathways yet that are truly green. Second lens is protection. So a little bit what we were talking about before. So we'd say protect what is precious today and for the future. That's leading us to all this work in conservation. So an example, when we set and looked at the UN Sustainable Development Goals and said, where has there been a dearth of private capital? So it's underinvested on one of the goals. That led us to the oceans, which are woefully underinvested from a private capital point of view. And we created an ocean fund, like something that's never done before. And very, very pleased that we've been able to mobilize in a short period of time hundreds of millions of capital for ocean conservation, which 5 years ago people said would have been an impossible task. And then the third leg of that triangle is transition. The one thing that we know is that for the high carbon emitting industries in particular, they're going to have to invest billions and trillions of money into their corporate transition to a net zero world. And as a financial services provider, we feel it's our obligation and duty to help finance that transition for our clients. So those three legs of the triangle altogether are really driving our strategy and the way we are behaving and trying to meet that 1.5 degree commitment.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And as you say, time is slipping away. So we are now on to the final question, and I'm going to ask the same question of each of our panelists. We are just under 5 months away from the COP26 conference itself. And so to each of our panelists, what are the 2 headlines that you would like to see coming out of COP26? What does success look like for you? Let's start with Virginie.
Right. So maybe a bit provocative, but I would say that we perhaps should keep our expectation in check so that we are not disappointed. Like after many COPs, I mean, I think the biggest benefits of COPs is the run-up. You know, it's really when there is this, and especially for this one, there is massive mobilization on the announcement. We'll see a flurry of announcements, which is great. You know, there is a kind of healthy competition to the top for the greater good. It's great. So maybe one headline would be something like COP26, finally 1.5 degrees within reach, which means more ambitious NDCs, and 100% of those Fortune 500 companies have committed to science-based targets on climate. You know, that would be for me success. And maybe the other one would be something like COP26 are finally putting the money where the mouth is as far as a just transition is concerned. You know, promises made to the developing countries are kept, especially the pledge of $100 billion a year, you know, in climate financing. So that could be the two great headlines to see after COP.
Thank you. So greater ambition on commitments and on finance, and capitalize on the momentum in advance of COP. That sounds excellent. Doug, same question to you.
Great, and I love the question about headlines. I do a series on LinkedIn of headlines of progress on sustainable living. So the more headlines, the better. So I really appreciate that. Sorry, that was not intended to be a shameless plug. I think first headline, exactly as Virginie said, is really that we got through COP26, we got the commitments needed by governments around the world to get us on track to the 1.5 degree world with the milestone by 2030 of 50% reduction. I think the second headline, would love to see a whole series of announcements, bold new commitments, collaborations, almost radical collaboration among private sector, governments, NGOs, other stakeholder groups. I'm going to cheat with a third. And that really is that similar to what Virginie said, that the topics of inclusion, equity, and just transition are actually on the agenda like they've never been before. So those are my 2 plus a bonus.
No, that's great. And the British government has already committed to this being the most inclusive COP. So I very much agree with you on your third point as well. Marisa, over to you. What does success look like for you at COP26?
Well, I don't want to echo all that's been said before because they stole my headlines. But if I'm going to add a few extras with my financial services hat on, I would love to see some sort of an agreement on how to price carbon globally. Because unless we can price the cost of all of these activities in an efficient market way, it's very hard to avoid free rider problems and some of these other things that creep in. And I think, you know, if we're all held to account with the cost of the things that we're doing to harm the planet, it will drive us in a very, very directed way to better behavior. So that would be one. I'd love to see that. I live in a very hopeful world. And the second one is some harmony of disclosure standards. We're moving there, but there's still not an agreement because our investors are saying, if I want to invest behind the ESG or sustainability leaders, I have a hard time today putting 2 companies in the same industry side by side and having this similar data to be able to make informed investment decisions. And if we want to get capital to continue to drive behind all these wonderful companies like my peers on this session who are doing amazing things, we need to have that investment community be able to do that in a very, very thoughtful way.
Thank you. Very much in agreement with that. And finally, Javier.
I think I would love to see acceleration, right, as one of the key headlines, even more. And align in a global action. And I think fully agree with my colleagues here, but really turn the ambition into action and act quicker and reduce these long-term goals to a shorter or as short as possible. And then I think a transition to a net zero society, it's so necessary, and I think it's been mentioned as well, but I fully agree. This has to happen, and we need to take bolder decisions as leaders in the different organizations and governments and so on. So that would be my two big ones, I believe.
Well, thank you so much to all of our panelists for an excellent conversation today, and more broadly for all of your leadership in your respective organisations and sectors. As I said at the beginning, tackling climate change is a whole of society effort, and the role of business and the private sector is at the heart of that. November's conference will be a crucial moment, and the run-up to it as well, as Marisa said, will be a crucial moment where the world needs to come together and raise its level of ambition. And conversations like these are hugely important on the road to COP. So from one Hannah, back to another.
Thank you so much, Hannah. Perhaps the best segue of the day. I think that last panel, it really shed light on the hard challenges that remain and the urgent conversations that are necessary. I appreciate that they spoke about financing the disruptors, about the importance of not stopping with your immediate business, but understanding your supply chain and distribution channels, and when in doubt, go to space. So this last panel spoke to many of the matters discussed in our morning partnership accelerator as well, and affirms the direction of our planning for the Concordia Annual Summit taking place September 20th. Each of our speakers in this last panel and throughout today spoke about cross-sector collaboration and partnerships in their sustainability work. This is, of course, a central message that Concordia wants to impress upon our audience today, and it feels like an appropriate space to wrap up. I want to take a moment to thank all of our partners at Rubicon, especially Michael Allegretti, David Racheson, and Katie Kinnear for the work they put into co-designing these sessions, our incredible speakers, members, Kara and Maddie on the Concordia team, and everyone who joined us today. I want to extend a special thank you to all of our members who are in attendance today as audience or speakers. Global patron members on our stage today included PepsiCo, SAS, Walmart, Visa, Bayer, PMI, and Microsoft. Through these events, oh, and of course, Rubicon. Through these events, our members are co-building outcomes-driven programming that touch on key themes and build out our overall programming. Our membership community is the backbone of Concordia's work, and our members play a vital role in raising important issues and supporting the cause of cross-sector collaboration to bring about social impact. To learn more about membership, including how our partnerships department works year-round to create and strengthen public-private partnerships in pursuit of positive social impact, connect with any Concordia team member. We'd love to have that conversation with you and learn more about your work as it relates to this. This conversation will continue at the 2021 Concordia Annual Summit, taking place in person and virtually the week of September 20th. Registration opens in July, and if you're not yet a member, we encourage you to join Concordia to access the in-person networking and learning opportunities of the event, or to join us digitally. We have other upcoming Concordia Lives. If you like this format and are eager to learn more about where collaboration is playing a role, we're partnering with Kyle House Group, Greyston, and USA for IOM for important conversations related to COVID-19 and healthcare delivery, speaking about inclusive employment models that will reshape what the workforce of America looks like, and all matters related to migration and refugee-related matters with U.S. International Organization for Migration. So stay tuned on the exciting programming Concordia's got for the summer. Join us in September for the Concordia Annual Summit. And again, a huge thank you to everyone for lending their time, their expertise, and their questions into what made today. Have a wonderful one, and thanks for joining us. Bye-bye.